It's been asked over these last days, the question, what is it that binds these three elements, these three dimensions of life together for us, crudely spoken, our street smarts and our intuition and our subjectivity, in order to remind you of a story, to see what relationship we can find in an endeavor to answer this question. It's a story about wisdom and luck. And they met on the road one day, and they got into a discussion. In fact, it was quite an argument, really, because wisdom was saying, well, nothing would move in life without me. Without the sum total of experience and knowledge that makes me wisdom, there would be no movement in life. And I said, that's all very well for you to say, but without me, nothing would happen. Well, the argument got quite heated, really. But anyway, at that moment, somewhere in the world, a small boy was born. And it was decided between wisdom and luck that one of them would enter into him, and they would be able to prove who was the greater. So they drew straws, and it was wisdom who was the one who entered into this young being, this young boy. So as it happened, this young boy was born into a very poor family. His mother was a widow, she was barely able to put food on the table, but he was very clever. And at a very early age, he was taken in by the local goldsmith to become a master jeweler, which he did. He became very, very adept at working with gold. But, after some while, as he was getting into his late teens, he got rather tired of this, and he said to his mother, I'm going out to make my way in the world. So, with great regret, his mother let him go, and he set out for the capital of the country in which he lived. And when he entered the capital, with his aplomb and his confidence, he went to the tailor, who, as it happens, was the tailor of the emperor himself, to ask him, could he be taken on as an apprentice. Well, he was a personable young man, so the tailor took him on, and before long, with his cleverness and his abilities, the clothes that were being made for the emperor was so imaginative, and that the emperor asked, who's making these clothes for me? And the tailor himself said, it's me. But that was all right, this didn't bother the young man at all. But as it so happened, the emperor had a beautiful daughter who had come of marriageable age. But not only was she beautiful, she was a little bit haughty and a little bit stubborn, really. So she said that she would not marry any man unless they could make her speak. And if they were not able to do so, they would have their head lopped. So many young suitors came from near and far to win the princess's hand, but none of them were able to make her speak. But then our young man, the apprentice to the tailor, heard of this, and he said, I can make the princess speak. So, just in his peasant garb, very simply, of course, he presented himself at the palace, and of course, courtiers and even the emperor himself rather scoffed at it, but, the edict had been put out that whoever was able to make her speak would be the one that she married, and if whoever came along. So the young man was taken into the presence of the princess. But, as was the custom of those that had all been beheaded before him, servants were sent in to be present and witness whether, in fact, she had been made to speak. So when the young man came into the presence of the princess with the servants sitting around observing. He didn't even look at the princess. He kind of looked around, then he looked up at the candelabra and he said, "Oh, candelabra, I have a little problem that you might be able to help me with." He said, there were 3 friends who, one was a woodcarver, and one was a tailor, and one was a teacher, and they decided to go out into the world to make their way, make their fortunes. But they hadn't gone very far when it came to night time, and they came into a dark forest where they knew that there were wild animals around, so they decided that 2 of them would sleep while the other one stayed awake and kept guard, and then they would take turns through the night to make sure that they were safe from the wild animals. And as it happened, when the woodcarver, who was the first to take guard, he got a bit bored sitting there, so he took a piece of wood and he started to whittle it. And he whittled it in the shape of a beautiful, a naked maiden. And so after it was the woodcarver's turn, it was the turn of the tailor to take his shift. And he had bolts of cloth with him, because you know that these people, like, they carry their accoutrements along with them. So he took his bolt of cloth and he decided that he would garb this beautiful naked female. So he cut a garment for her and dressed her in the garments. Well, he went off to sleep, and it was the turn of the teacher to take his watch. And when the watchers saw this beautiful creature there, garbed, he spoke to her and got no response. So he thought, well, I'm a teacher. I have to teach her to speak. And this is just what he did. He spent his hours, and he made this beautiful creature speak. Well, when they woke up in the morning, of course, they each claimed her. I made her, so she's mine. I dressed her, so she's mine. I made her speak, so she's mine. So please, candelabra, can you tell me which one of them that she belonged to? The princess, of course, said, "Oh, of course she belongs to the one who made her speak." But as it happened, the servants had nodded off, and they didn't hear the princess speak. But of course they woke up, and they immediately, of course, saying, "Oh, this peasant couldn't have made our princess speak," and they marched him off down to the guillotine where his head was going to be lopped. Well, just when the executioner was about to bring down the guillotine on his head, Luck said to him, "You see what a mess you made of all of this? Now let me take over."
Who said that?
Luck said this to Wisdom. "See what you've done? You made such a mess of this. Now let me take over." So at that very moment, the princess came out on her balcony and saw her handsome youth who had made her speak with his head about to be lopped. So she raced down and said, "You cannot lop his head. He is the one who made me speak, and he is the man I'm going to marry." And of course the end of the story is absolutely evident. They lived happily ever after and had lots of children. But then, of course, is it a foregone conclusion? Who was the more powerful, Wisdom or Luck? So when we hear this story, we can ask ourselves, really, what is another name for luck? We know what wisdom is, the sum of experiences and knowledge. But what is luck? And the second question that arises out of it, what implication does it have in relationship to the question that's been asked? What is it that binds together our street smarts, our intuition, and our subjectivity in the moments of our existence. But first things first, luck. What other name would you give it? Luck.
Synchronicity.
Okay.
Coincidence.
And so, in this instance then, we can find the relationship between that and answering our question, what is it that binds the three together? So we take synchronicity then, isn't it? Synchronicity, a beautiful word, synchronicity. And again, of course, bringing these things around, because that question was asked quite some time ago. What is it that happens when movement and stillness meet? What is it that arises out of that meeting? Couldn't we answer the same thing? Synchronicity. So can we see the implications of this now? But how would we define synchronicity? To have luck, synchronicity, how would we interpret that now? To make it something substantial for us in relationship to answering this question. What is it that gives me this presence where it works? It all works. The meeting of stillness and movement, and that which arises out of being in this state of Satchitananda. The responses to life, the interaction with existence. Synchronicity, what other description can we give?
Truth.
Karma, fruit.
Truth.
Truth, yes, truth, our truth. Our truth? Our truth, yes. Because there's no doubts about it in this place of Satchitananda, is there? We have no doubts. There's no dialogue in our head. Or if I say there is, does that mean at all? There's not a dialogue, is there? Because of that oneness with life, that movement of life meeting in stillness creates this state, if you might call it, which evokes the responses to that interaction, which inevitably there is. There's always got to be an out, because there's always an inpouring. There has to be outpouring. So then, have we answered our questions? There's still more.
For the moment.